5 cheap budget soundproofing material to use to soundproof your room. And the thing is with this list, I didn't list a bunch of $5, $10 items, just the cheapest budget soundproofing material that might or might not work very well. I chose the cheapest material that will give you the best soundproofing performance that you can hope for. At least you'll notice a difference. Now the first one would be for soundproofing footstep noise. I have a lot of people asking me, how do I get rid of all the footstep noise coming from upstairs? And there are many ways on how to mitigate it, but a lot of these ways, they don't really work. You can add an extra layer of drywall, you can do all those things, but to actually be able to soundproof that vibrational noise, those thumping noise, just adding a little bit more mass or even a lot of mass, it's not really going to be that effective, and it's going to end up costing you a lot of money and leave you kind of pissed off. So what I would suggest would be using something called a resilient channel. Now, this can be cheap budget or it can be really expensive depending on your situation. Now, the cheap budget way on doing it is to add it yourself. Installing it yourself, it's not that complicated to install. Now, this works a lot better, well, it only works, I guess, if your ceiling is unfinished. If there's not already any drywall on the ceiling, then it's going to be a lot cheaper than having to rip out the drywall that's already there. But even if you have to remove the drywall, it's more cost effective than adding some more mass and adding things in between the drywall and not really getting the results. You'll still hear and feel the thumps if there is a lot of traffic noise up above. Now, what resilient channel is, it's these thin metal strips that aligns themselves from end to end of your ceiling, and you attach them directly on the studs. Now what this does, it creates a floating ceiling because you're attaching the resilient channel directly onto the studs of the ceiling, and the drywall, you're attaching that directly onto the resilient channel and not on the studs. So the ceiling itself is not attached to the studs, so all that vibration is being dissipated into the resilient channel. Now the only thing, if you are going to install it yourself or you are going to hire somebody to do it, make sure that they've done it before or they at least know how to do it. And if you're going to install it yourself, the most important thing to do is, well, watch some YouTube videos on how to do it. I will have a video, an upcoming video in probably 5 or 6 weeks of how to install a resilient channel. I'll show you exactly how to do it. So make sure to subscribe to catch that one. Now, the main reason why this might not work for some people and how you can avoid that from not working with you is to make sure that you use the proper screws to screw your drywall into the resilient channel, because if your screws are just a little bit too long, they will go right into the studs, and now your ceiling is no longer a floating ceiling because you've reattached it into the studs. Now this is called decoupling. Now resilient channel will cost between $1 and $2 for every linear foot. Now, as I said, that might seem a little bit expensive and not on the cheap budget side, but the main reason why this is on the list is because it works very well, and it's almost the only way to get rid of that footstep noise. I'll also have links in the description below of all of the products I talk about in this video, and also if you have questions about any of these products, just go in the search tab on my YouTube channel and write resilient channel. You'll find videos about resilient channel or any other items I talk about in this video. So it's pretty easy to find out all the information. Second one is pink fiberglass insulation. You might be wondering, why am I even talking about fiberglass insulation? It doesn't work very well at blocking and noise. It's not really a soundproofing product, and that's all true. But the thing is you usually have that insulation in between the walls on the outside of your home because you want to, obviously it's for weather control, hot and cold. But what you don't have in between the layers of drywall inside your home from room to room is any type of insulation, typically. And what you have is just an open cavity, an echo chamber inside the wall. So the pink fiberglass insulation isn't going to do anything to block noise. It's not going to absorb any of the lower frequency noise like the resilient channel will do. But what it will do, it will lower a little bit of the higher frequency noise like people talking. So when you do have some sound waves going through the drywall, in between the two layers of drywall in between rooms where there's essentially an echo chamber, it will make that noise sound louder. So the insulation inside the walls between rooms is going to help absorb some of that echo, some of that noise. So it's more of a sound absorber, sound deadener. Of course, it doesn't block the sound, but if it can make that noise sound less loud, it's all part of noise reduction. And what's nice is this type of insulation is not that expensive. It's about 45 to 60 cents for a bat or a roll. So it's not that expensive if you want to just soundproof one wall inside your home, if the drywall is already off, or if you're doing the ceiling and you are adding the resilient channel, it's a good idea to add some insulation to further mitigate all of those echoing sound, because those footsteps, those vibrational noise will also create echo into the ceiling cavity. So adding that insulation is certainly not going to hurt, and it's not going to break the bank. You can opt for something like rock wool insulation. It's more of a sound deadening insulation than the pink fiberglass, but it will cost double or triple the amount for that type of insulation versus the pink fiberglass. That's why I'm more talking about the pink fiberglass, because it will give you results, but what the rock wool will do, it helps with the high frequency noise, but it also helps a little bit with the lower frequency noise because it is denser, it is heavier, and that's what helps with the lower frequency noise like footsteps. So that can be a cheap and effective way to reduce the noise coming from outside the room into your room, or vice versa. Number 3 is a product to use to seal the gaps and the cracks around doors and windows, because a lot of the noise, most of the noise, is coming through the door, or if you're dealing with outside noise, it's coming through the window. So a lot of the times it's not really worth soundproofing a full wall if you're not going to soundproof the door first. And if you have a lot of gaps and cracks around the doors, around the windows, something like a silicone caulking can work very well at reducing the noise going from room to room, because all those cracks is letting noise right through. An easy way to find out if you have cracks around your door is just to have the light on the other side of the room, close the door, turn off the lights in your room, and see how much light shines right through the door. A lot of the times there's going to be light that's shining on the sides, on the top, and you want to seal those gaps and those cracks with caulking. Now you can buy something like acoustical caulking, but it seems that it's just gone up in price so much in the last few years. Now it's between $20 and $30 for just one tube, and what this does is that it doesn't crack over time like a lot of non-silicone, just cheap caulking. So acoustic sealant can get quite expensive. And silicone caulking is not going to crack over time. It stays flexible because a house shifts, people slam doors because they're pissed off. So something that doesn't crack over time is going to help a lot more than just a regular caulking that a lot of people use that just cracks. So silicone caulking, seal all the cracks around the doors, around the windows, and you'll be good to go. Now, number 5 is a weather strip. Now, a weather strip can be used to soundproof a door or a window. Now, just make sure that it is a smaller, thinner weather strip that actually fits in the inside casing of the door where the door meets the casing, basically the doorstop. And if there is a lot of wobble if you close the door, grab the handle, if there's a lot of wobble, then maybe adding a weather strip to really seal that is going to help soundproof the door. And these weather strips are about $5, $10, $15, depending on the length and how much you want. You can also use this to soundproof a window, because typically windows already have a weather strip, but a lot of the times weather strips degrades, wears off, and you need to replace it. And a lot of people wonders why there's noise and also hot and cold coming through the window. Replace a weather strip and you will see a decrease in all of that coming through the window. One thing, however, some people say I add weather strip around the door and it just doesn't stick. After a while it just peels off, and even the first day doesn't stick. One pro tip to add the weather strip, well, it's really not a pro tip, it's just something that most people, and even I've forgotten in the past, is to make sure to clean the surface where the weather strip is going to be stuck on, because it is a self-adhesive weather strip. Just make sure that it is clean and then dry before attaching it, because a lot of the times there'll be a layer of dust on the surface where you're attaching the weather strip, and a few minutes later it just will peel off, or a few days later it will just peel off and you'll be pissed off. And you'll probably slam the door, and then you'll need more caulking, and it's just not worth doing all that. If you just clean and dry that surface, you'll be good to go. And number 5 is simply drywall. Now, drywall is the number one thing to put on a wall to block the noise from coming through the other side of the room. You can add a lot of things in between the layers of drywall, like mass-loaded vinyl, acoustical compound, a lot of stuff that adds a cost. But what you can do is forget about all that. The main thing that will soundproof that wall, that will decrease the amounts of decibels coming from one room to the next, is adding mass, adding drywall. And you don't have to go ahead and buy the expensive soundproof drywall. You can just use regular drywall. But what I would suggest is using 5/8" drywall, because it is just a little bit more expensive than the typical 1/2" drywall, and it does work a lot better at blocking noise. Because the best way of blocking the sound wave, of soundproofing a room, is to add mass. And that's the easiest way to add mass, and the cheapest way to add mass is just to add another layer or even 2 layers of drywall on top of the drywall that's already there, so you're not having to rip out the wall. And by doing that, you'll notice that a lot of noise is left on the other side of the wall and not into your room. And also, one thing that you can use after it's all done, you can grab your silicone caulking or your acoustical caulking, whatever type of caulking that you bought, something that doesn't crack, and you can add it in between the electrical outlet box and the drywall. There's going to be usually a very small gap. You can add that around, and it works very well at blocking that noise, because if you don't have any insulation inside the wall, then the crack inside your electrical outlet, typically there's another electrical outlet back to back from yours that will also have cracks and a lot of holes inside that electrical box, which if the wall is already finished, there's not really anything that you can do with that, but some noise is going to come through that electrical box. Just put your ear right to the electrical box and have somebody on the other side of the room talk to you through the electrical outlet. And you'll notice that, yeah, there's a hole inside the wall on both walls, and people don't seem to think that that really matters. But any gaps or any holes you have inside the wall will let noise in. They say that just a crack will let about 50% of the noise back into the room. And an easy way to notice if this is true is just to use a window. If you have a busy street right in front of you, just open the window just a crack, and you'll notice there's a lot of noise coming into the room, and then you just close it and the noise is almost gone if the window is actually pretty good. That's a good example for the cracks inside your wall where the electrical outlets would be. And since we're already on the subject of electrical outlet box, I can add a number 6, and this is a product that you use to wrap the electrical outlet box completely to seal all those holes. It's called Putty Pads. This is a fire prevention application where if there is a small fire, if there's a short that happens inside the electrical outlet, it will prevent it from spreading for a time. So it'll slow down the progression of the fire. But what it also does, it blocks all those holes inside that electrical outlet box, and it prevents noise from coming through from the other room. But the caveat of this is you have to have the wall unfinished. So if your wall is unfinished, you're about to soundproof a wall and you want to add insulation in between the walls, then wrapping that electrical outlet box with a putty pad, these are about $5, $6, $7 each pads, but you probably only need a few of these pads to do one wall, because you do the electrical outlet box, and also if you have a light switch on that wall, you could also wrap the light switch, because that box also has holes that will let noise freely go from room to room. And that's a good way to soundproof the wall completely, because if your wall is unfinished and you do add some insulation, if you add your resilient channel, if you add your extra layers of drywall, you've completely sealed that wall, but yet that electrical outlet still has all those holes going through, then you will have noise coming through. So there you have it, 6 soundproofing material that won't break the bank. If that's my list, if you have your own list, or if you really don't agree with with these 6 materials, let me know in the comment section below. Even if you're mean about it, let me know. Actually, what I do with those mean comments, which I don't really get that many of, is I record them to myself, and I re-listen to them if I do a workout or if I go jogging or biking. I listen to all those comments over and over in my head, or I guess in my earphones, and it just gives me inspiration. I actually find it gives me energy to listen to it. It's kind of sad, but it's a different way of coping. If 5 or 6 items or soundproofing materials wasn't enough for you, list of 50 right there. Yeah, I found 50. And actually I found like 70, but I had to break it down to 50 soundproofing materials to use to soundproof a room. There is a lot of items out there a lot of items and gadgets that you can use to soundproof a room that this list was only 5, I guess 6, so I didn't add a lot from this 50. So go watch this video and you'll definitely find different ways on soundproofing a room for yourself.